If every AI org had to adopt one new habit, what do you think it should be?
Every place that measured their success asked themselves early and often the ways in which the choices they made in measurement are incorrect. So things in Google. That's really an output of the measurement that you've chosen. I chose to use the data source that had high coverage, that was cheap, that was easy to collect. I chose the function that was quick to evaluate and that didn't require human intervention or massive compute power. All those things that came into the measurements that we make for our success. Can we enumerate the ways in which it will lie to us? I think so often machine learning leans on the crutch of I have data, number goes up. And I want us to spend more time asking ourselves, not did we get it right, but what are the ways in which we got it wrong? And
Where do you even start? How do you assess whether something's misbehaving?
yeah.
Today's guest is Will Landecker, founder of Accountable Algorithm and a responsible AI consultant. In this episode, we'll explore the hidden trade-offs behind AI metrics, why understanding your model's failures matters more than its accuracy, what responsible AI actually looks like inside real companies, and how agentic systems and feedback loops are changing the risk landscape. Don't forget to subscribe to Data Neighbor on your favorite podcast app and YouTube. It's the best way to stay updated. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Will Landecker. Welcome back to Data Neighbors with Hai, Sravya, and Sean. Today, we're diving into one of the most urgent topics in AI right now. How do we build systems that aren't just powerful, but are safe, fair, and accountable? So we're thrilled to be joined by Will Landecker. Will is a machine learning and data science consultant focused on responsible AI. He's worked across some of the most influential companies in tech, Twitter, Stripe, Lyft, Nextdoor with Sravya and Hai and I. And now he's advising organizations on responsible AI and safety as a hands-on technical consultant. He's helping these teams make AI that actually, behaves and getting into the real work of operationalizing ethics. So Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, Will. So nice to see you
Good to see you,
after
Sravya.
our time at Nextdoor.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, we were talking earlier, these are the really fun episodes with our friends from Nextdoor. It's like, there's no lead up 15 minutes of trying to get to know everyone. We're like, okay, we can just get into it.
It's more like weeding out all the gossip. But do you remember that one time that thing happened?
Yes.
I know.
Okay, so maybe to kick it off, you worked at a lot of these big tech companies. When did responsible AI kind of become urgent for you personally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that I had hints throughout grad school when I was doing my PhD in machine learning that a lot of people seem to be really interested in building the most accurate model the most efficiently with the least data or the least energy or the fastest. And I was always curious and kind of ripping open the model to inspect it, to ask it, what are you doing? What have you learned? And why are you doing it that way? And so my research for my dissertation was in interpretable machine learning. For me, these models that absorb so much from data feels like such a missed opportunity to just put them in the corner and say, now predict. And for that to be that. There's so much we can glean from them. There's such a conversation that a human or a group of people can have with all of that data, and a model is a great thing to study. When I joined industry, there wasn't really a niche for that. There wasn't really a track for people who wanted to inspect the model.
Yeah.
It was more like, just build a thing. Just build it, make it predict, and somehow someone will make money.
Make the metrics go up.
Yeah. And I was always disappointed. I was disappointed that we couldn't spend more time learning and thinking and asking questions. And I found myself getting pulled into conversations around, initially, it was things like trust and safety related to machine learning. Is this model leaking private data in some unintentional way? Is it predicting things that are harming users? Or is it serving content that's harming users in some way? And so a lot of these questions that had come up previously academically around what can I learn from this black box started to look a little bit more like, do we feel good about what this thing is doing, about how it's doing it? And ultimately that becomes a question of what we are asking a machine to do and why. And for a long time, I did this work without the phrase responsible AI or AI ethics. I just didn't know that language. And I think they probably didn't exist when I started this.
Mhm.
But in the last 5 or so years, once that field became, very clear that it sort of announced itself to the world that it existed, I was like, that's what it is. That's what I do. Before that, it was sort of data science and machine learning engineering for like safety and privacy and trust and high
Yeah.
assurance systems. So I guess the short answer to your question is it's always been a pressing need of mine. It hasn't always been called responsible AI. That's just what it's called today. But in general, I'm really, really interested in making sure that the systems that we're building that are automating so many decisions at such an enormous scale that we're hoping are helping so many people, so many businesses, so many communities are actually doing the things that are truly helpful to all those people, that we know what they're doing, that their actions are aligned with our goals, and that our methods are aligned with our own plans, and that all these things are kind of nicely lined up and producing the thing that we need. And the thing that keeps me up at night is when we're not checking, is when we
Yeah.
don't know, is all the sneaky stuff that can sort of filter in through the sides.
Oh my God. Well, one thing before we get into the meat of the topic, responsible AI, I want to highlight something is that when you go after something you truly feel passionate about, like you think that's what you want to always work on, I think trying like the new things or learning in that space gets so much more easier, and you just get
Yeah,
into the groove of
totally.
it so much more easier. So this is what like we generally tend to tell people: if you are interested to break into AI, break into data, choose a domain or choose an area that you're pretty passionate about, and that will lead to a successful career in itself. And I think what you're talking about is an example of that for sure.
I totally agree. I think that passion and like inherent interest in a subject can carry us through those hard times when, the learning becomes difficult or the conversation around the topic becomes, I don't know, political, for example, or whatever part it is that doesn't brighten your day. If you know what it is, if you have it sort of burning inside of you, then that can really kind of be fuel. I will also say for folks who are maybe earlier on in their career, you find yourself listening to that advice of doing the thing you're passionate about, and it makes you feel a little bit panicky because you have this internal question that's like, wait, but what's the thing that I'm passionate about? I
I know.
also want people to feel that that's okay, because
Yeah.
although I can say now in retrospect, hey, I've been doing this thing called responsible AI, I can't stress how like difficult it was before that phrase existed. And people were saying, wait, but you're a data scientist. You make line go up, you build model, everything works out. And I was like, no, there's something else, and I don't know how to articulate it yet. So it's also okay. This is not saying no to what you're saying, but also just a yes and. It's also okay to search for what that thing is, right? And I'd say it's actually critical that like we try a bunch of things not knowing, is this going to be the thing that I'm super excited about? And often it's only in retrospect, right? Only after we've been doing it for 5 or 10 years that we can trace that arc and say that's the narrative, that's what it's called. I can tie a bow on it, I can come on a podcast and give say something that sounds cohesive, because for a long time it wasn't cohesive in my own mind.
And now, thank you so much, Will. That totally makes sense. And coming back to responsible AI, Will, like, how do you see it change over the last few years? And what do you
Yeah.
think about responsible AI right now? I would say it's like the elephant in the room. Right? In every company that's trying to go agentic, everyone that's trying to, like use LLMs in their business workflows or, all of that, like probably just jumping right in now.
Yeah, it really is an exciting time, a scary time. I'll go with an important time to think about responsible AI. One of the big ones for me is that just in those last few years with OpenAI, with Anthropic, with all the similar sort of generative modeling that's going on off premises, right, by third-party companies, there's a huge tail of organizations that see AI and data-driven decision-making within grasp maybe for the first time. Right? Maybe they
That's
had
true.
people who were doing spreadsheets before, but they weren't going to go and hire a whole machine learning team. They had software engineers. They weren't going to build out a data science org, whatever it is. Those companies can now say, hey, this is just an API call, right? All I have to do is send it to Claude, send it to ChatGPT, and boom, we're AI, we're in the game. And I think a lot of people rightfully look at that and ask, like, what's happening on the other end over there? Like what's completing this API request for me? What am I exposing my users to? What am I
Yeah.
exposing myself to in terms of risk, in terms of downside, a loss of growth, and whatever kind of reputational concerns could happen if I don't pay attention to the responsibility of what I'm doing here. So I think with that surge of new abilities to have very complex and not just black box, but like, I don't even have my hands on it models, right? Like it lives somewhere else most of the time, comes many people who I think do and should care about paying attention, right? Paying attention to what are some of the downsides? What are some of the things that could go wrong? What are some of the things that could affect the user, that could affect the company, that could affect just society in general? Because with this opportunity comes risk. And it's not always clear exactly what the risk is and how to quantify it. So I think that's one of the biggest moves right now, is just how many people are using AI in some way, but that way is like the least observable in many ways that it's ever been, and it creates more, I think, of a pressing need to try and glean something from what we're building.
What are some of those downsides, Will?
I was going to ask that. No wonder.
One downside for me, I don't know if it's ethical, is I can't man, I type so bad now because like when it's reading your text, like it's just creating an embedding. So I've now got into my head where it's like it doesn't give a shit if I'm spelling anything right. Like I'll be like writing stuff and my wife is like, what? It's like gibberish. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. It's turning it into numbers. Like it knows. And then but the problem is then I'll text my friends and they'll be like,
And they
"Wow,
don't
look
have
at
the
it."
same embedding.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll text Robbie and hi, and I'll have to look back like, oh gosh, I got to edit this. Like, I have like 12 misspellings in there
Like,
because I'm just like,
what a wonderful thing, right? So, Sean, what is AI doing to us is making us a lot more powerful when we use it and so much more powerless without it compared to our
Yeah.
previous selves, right? Like,
yeah,
and imagine you and I and Will, like we all had regular education. We went through this. We've been through times without AI. But what about young kids today who are going through college and like education now? Like, what about their critical thinking, their writing? And like, I bet that's going to be, I mean, that's a big ethical responsible AI question right there.
Yeah, the question of what are we going to expose children to from AI generated content is many podcasts all on its
Yeah.
own.
Yes. We'll
and-
be answering all those societal questions in this 1 hour podcast.
And I would love to, honestly, but I'll try and stick to the question as you asked it, which is like, what are some of those risks today? I think I sort of see two big flavors of risks when I'm thinking about automating decisions in general. And data and models are a way of automating, but they're not the only ones. So one of them is that those decisions can be just like downright harmful in some way. It could be harmful to everybody, a lot or a little. It could be harmful to some people, but not other people. We have issues around bias, right? Or discrimination or something like this. And the category here is just like the harm is clear, right? We see loans are not being approved at the same rates. We see people are not being given the same access, or maybe just the whole experience is degraded after this, automation thing comes in for everybody. The harm is clear. It's upfront. It's measurable. We know about it. We feel it. It's painful. And those are important. And those are ones that we definitely care about in responsible AI and AI ethics. Then, this is not a distinct category, but is sort of like the other end of the spectrum, are the harms that happen that we don't really notice right away. And these ones tend to be more like a whisper. So if before I was worried about a loan not being approved, over here it might just be like a slight change in interest rates, something small, something very hard to detect unless you are the holder of all the data. But these small differences that make technology not work for everybody, that start exacerbating these gaps of opportunities, of resources, of allocation. Those are ones that are, to me, a little bit more worrying, not in that they're doing more harm, but that they're harder to know about. They're a little bit more the unknown. Those ones keep me up a little bit more because I'm like, have I thought about all the things? You really need to have a strong hypothesis to go out looking for those. Whereas in the former category, it's like someone walks up and tells you like, man, that algorithm, it just sucks for this group. And you're like, great. great. We know, we know what to do. But these little whispers, these little bits of bias, how are the ways in which the generated images, the generated text, how are they sort of normative to a certain group? How are they alienating for another group in slight ways? Those are going to add up. And we're just talking about how useful these products are. Everyone's using them, right? So a tiny gap that's multiplied by 8 billion humans is an enormous effect. And those things are going to affect the world, and they're hard to know about. They are hard to notice. They require more than just somebody saying, this thing hurt me. They require going out and proactively seeking.
So, Will, can you explain more about the loan thing that you mentioned? I want to understand the example more. So when you said it's very clear when the loan doesn't get approved because of automation in ML, what does it exactly mean? And just trying to understand what the detail.
Yeah, it's a good question. So imagine a startup that makes loans and is, rather than trying to use some of the traditional banking signals like a credit score, they're using machine learning. They're using AI. They're using ChatGPT. They're saying, hey, we got this information from a person. We have their payment histories. We have their consumer history. We have a snapshot of their bank statement. Tell us if we should give this person a loan. Now, if that system were very biased, let's say had a strong gender bias in some way, people would be, one, looking for that, and two, a strong bias is one that's easy to detect. You hear about it from everyone around you. You develop the hypothesis quickly, easy to confirm in the data. Okay, we have a problem. That's not good, but we know what the problem is. We know what to work on. On the other hand, if the system is approving at very similar rates for different groups, maybe it's demographics, maybe it's some other type of group, and it's just slightly tweaking interest rates on the loan a little bit in ways that are hard to prove without a tremendous pile of data. Those are those unknown problems. And I call them unknown because, in the real world, you don't have someone like me telling you what the story is. We literally don't know.
Yeah.
The data is not shouting at us in the same way. It requires a fine-tooth comb to go in. So that's sort of the example I was thinking about there.
Yeah. And those it's hard with machine learning models that are, very good at identifying even latent kind of unobserved features. Even when you're trying to be like, oh, I'm not going to include race in my loan model. But if there's a bunch of other features that can infer the race underlying that, you're going to end up with a racist model.
Indeed. Not out of any, intention to do so.
Yes.
And not because you don't care or anything. It's just that, when you started talking, Sean, you said these machine learning models that are good, and that word good, or accurate does so much work in the data-driven world. And so much about responsible AI and AI ethics is diving into that one word and saying what do we mean when we say good? Because if we're not looking super closely, we do what's easy. And when you have a large pile of data that you've sampled randomly or exhaustively from whatever your system is, good often means it's accurately making predictions that are, in general, across the whole data set, better than what the other options were in terms of other models I was considering.
Right.
But if the data set that I sampled is perhaps overrepresented in some ways, or even if it's a truly random sample of some place, it's still going to show majority groups. It's still going to have more advantage. It's still going to have disadvantaged groups. And if we're not asking the model to be careful, it's going to give itself credit for doing a good job on the majority group, right? It's just in the numbers. And we can kid ourselves into saying, well, that's just objectively what good is, right? Because, hey, I just asked it to be good, which means be accurate. And it happens to be that 90% of my applicants were men. That's just the way banking works. That's not my fault. That's what the data says. And so objectively, this is a good model. And yeah, it gives worse, loan rates to women. What are you going to do? This is good, right? And so this is where responsible AI pulls the ripcord, says, stop everything. That's not a good choice. It's not a good choice for anybody. It's not a good choice for the users. It's not a good choice for the company. It's putting everybody at risk, and it's widening these gaps that existed upstream of you. So although you can claim it wasn't your fault that it was there, everyone downstream of you is now going to be blaming you because you are making that gap worse actively by not seeking these out. So yes, what is good? That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's an example of probably having a bad executive who has bias towards men. Imagine running a loan company where the loan approver is biased towards maybe women. She'll decide to leave her job and, be a homemaker. Then I'm not going to approve a loan for her versus, then you want to fire that bad executive, right? Have some principles on how you hire people. So you're talking about those principles that you put in place to ensure that whatever output that comes through follows that.
So I think the example you bring up is one that I agree with. Someone who has that bias explicitly deserves to be fired and replaced with someone who doesn't or who has some other beliefs. But I think the problem can even be more slippery than
That's true. Yeah.
someone who goes in with an intention to discriminate. Now, in my example, we were talking about banking data is just, I'm going to use the word naturally, meaning if I sample randomly from existing banking data, overrepresented towards certain advantage group. Maybe it's people of a certain age, a certain race, a certain socioeconomic status. Executive doesn't have to say that's good. All the executive has to say is, well, what's in the data? And that is such an innocuous statement. We accept that all over the place. The three of us have worked at places where executives were allowed to say, well, what does the data say? Every place I've ever worked, people are allowed to say that without someone scrutinizing, is it good? Is it okay to let the data dictate who's going to be served, in what way compared to others? That's where I think we maybe need to pay closer attention in general with automation, but also specifically with AI today.
Yeah, it's interesting right now because when we were working at like Nextdoor, we had like tens of millions of users, and it is hard when you have that many people to like dive in and really understand what's going on there. My job now, like we have like a much smaller user base, and my like mindset on data is like completely shifted to like, well, one, like we just don't have as much data because there's not as many users. But now I'm just like, okay, data is really truly only one component of information. And actually like calling users is just like super high quality feedback as well. Talking to subject matter experts is like really, really important too. And like this is just another like source of information that like, you don't have to follow the data all the time. But I know in previous companies, I haven't always been like that. I've been the person who's like, I don't know, man, like numbers going up.
It's number goes up is such a belief system to break free of, especially when the data is free flowing, right? Because there's always another beat, another tick that comes in that says, look, it's continuing to work. I like your point about, thinking about subject matter expertise, domain experts' knowledge, right, as other sources of information. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, that's always the most rewarding part of any job is when I get to work with experts, right? I can tell you what's in the data. I can give you an opinion of what I think we should think or feel about what we see in the data. But how fun is it when you have someone on the team who's, done some graduate school research or came from some research think tank around the thing that you're working on, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is going to go both ways. Like I'll tell you what's in the data, but then you're going to tell me all kinds of things I didn't know about the human attention span and about our desire to connect with each other and all these things that are popping up. And that if I can incorporate that knowledge and the data's insights together, we're going to build something that's so much more interest. And selfishly, it's just way more rewarding, right? Like I'm going to learn things too. I'm not just doing a book report on this CSV. I'm actually like,
book report on CSV.
I'm getting something new out of this. I'm learning about this person's research, and it's a way more interesting way to go about it.
Dang, I'm calling all my analyses book reports on CSVs now. That is like awesome. So true. So say you have a company that is like, okay, I do want to understand like what's going on, and I want to understand my risks, like your clients. Yeah, tell us your process in terms of like how do you assess, like where do you even start in that scenario? How do you assess whether something's misbehaving? I imagine there's a whole like company cultural aspect to this too. Love to kind of hear about when you just get in there, what happens.
The culture one is a good one. So remind me if I don't touch on that here. But starting at the beginning, when I first sort of connect with a new organization to work with them, Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with people who are kind of at all levels of the AI development stack and level of fluency. I've worked with companies that are building the enormous generative AI models, as well as places that are like little mom and pop data shops that are doing,
Cool.
handcrafted, small batch, artisanally
Nice.
curated models, and they're getting started. And so the process for those two is very different. But the things that I'm after in both cases are trying to understand what is it that they're currently building? Do they currently have something that they are already concerned about? Or are they getting in before the concern shows up? Are we still in the design or the building phase? My questions are moving us pretty much right away towards trying to understand what are the risks? What are the
Mhm.
risks of the thing that we're doing here? And how do we mitigate those risks? So big company, a lot of the risks look like small errors that are not getting flagged, right? If I have a thing that's really misbehaving, my users will flag it. We'll take it down. We've got good AI governance. It'll take care of itself. It's no problem. For the smaller company, it's like, I don't know if anyone's ever going to tell me or if I'm just going to lose my business. If for these small little risks, right? Sort of the whispers that we were talking about before, little bits of bias here and there that no one's going to necessarily flag anything, we need to proactively look for those things. So
Yeah.
coming up with a list of and kind of user stories for what is the damage that can be done to a user, to a community, to this company if we are not building something correctly. A lot of it looks a lot like, I guess, what we're calling alignment these days, right? So, like, what are the ways in which we might be building something that is making number go up, but it turns out up is not actually the direction that I was hoping it was for the thing that I'm building.
Hmm.
So once we understand sort of risks and goals, we start trying to measure things quantitatively. And depending on the scale of the company, that is sometimes fairly straightforward and sometimes impossible, I will say. If we're talking about things like demographic disparities and biases, oh, great. Do you know the demographics of your users? Do you have a trustworthy source of data that tells you which group each person is a member of so that we can compare things? A lot of places don't. A lot of places are considering it, and a lot of places are downright scared and have principles against ever coming up with or holding on to any information about information like that.
Yeah. Right.
And okay, if that's the case, or if we have some other notion of fairness or responsibility that we want to focus on, fine. But a lot of this still does come down to understanding what the risks are and then trying to understand how those risks are distributed among some dimension that we care about. And yeah, it can look very different depending on just sort of the maturity of the organization.
That's awesome, Will. So, Will, now that, let's say, in this new world of everything that's going to become agentic, that's what we're hearing around, right? What do you think people are not thinking about right now that they should start thinking?
One of the ones that
I was trying to think less with the agentic stuff. So that was kind of my goal. So
if you
Think
hire me
less.
as your consultant, Sean, I will do the thinking
there
for
we
you.
go.
All right. You send me your poorly written text messages. I will run it through the embedding. Shavi and Hai won't even know. They'll
There
just
we
get the
go.
embedding vector and they'll be like, God, I get it. I just get it. I think that people are talking about some of the really important stuff already, right? People do talk about bias. People do talk about discrimination. That's great. Moving towards the Gen AI and the agentic world, some of the things that really concern me are the feedback loops that we're creating in terms of products and data.
Oh,
Yep.
that's such a good point.
And I will say
Yeah.
that I'm always concerned about that. So it's not like I had some brilliant revelation recently. This was like a slow burn over a long period that really anytime we're building products out of data, and then those products are going to users, and then users are generating more data, we're entering into some feedback loop that is concerning. In sort of the non-agentic, not pre-Gen AI era, we had a lot of these checkpoints where we would stop and, often a data scientist would jump in and look at the data and would say, I'm noticing some things are changing. Or we'd have monitoring on the machine learning platform that would say, hey, there's drift going on here. We had some hope. Not that we always took advantage of it, but we had these moments in the sort of the agentic world that we may be marching towards, where maybe this is not the agentic you're thinking of, redirect me if you want, but where we have different sort of AI agents and sort of
Yep.
sub-processes interacting with each other directly. There's a lot less opportunity for us, I think, to take a beat and to say, at a human speed, do we like the thing that's happening in that feedback loop? I think things can happen
Yeah.
very quick when it's machine to machine. And I think if these two things talking to each other have independent errors, they will duke it out, and we will be relieved that their statistical independence help each other learn somehow. But if their errors are correlated in any direction, then you can bet that is the direction these agents are going to start pushing us.
Yeah.
And that's concerning if it's happening automatically and quickly and often.
Yeah, and when I think about like, I talk to people about like, oh yeah, well, how you have humans like in a loop with agentic AI. Like, I always feel like it's in the sense of, oh, there's going to be a bug in the code, or it's not going to work exactly, and it's going to error out, and then a human has to come in and like review some stuff. This isn't about like something airing out or a bug. It's like this is about, if it's exposing private information or making like unsafe decisions,
Yeah.
like that kind of feedback loop could just keep going without anyone knowing about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or even if we do have monitoring practices in place, the speed with which things can happen when it is, computer to computer is much greater than what happens when it's computer to user, right? Users, I don't know if we spend a lot of time in social media and other sort of consumer-facing companies talking about the shortcomings of users reporting stuff. Not everyone reports the same thing for the same
I know
reasons.
there's bias and
Yeah,
stuff. Yep.
and everyone's bias is a little bit different, and my bias as a company is different than the users, and it's not perfect. Fine, yes, and gosh, I don't know how much we ever appreciated the fact that like that gave us so much, that when something
It
was
was
a
a
runaway
human.
train, it was a human. And often it was thousands, right? Or tens of thousands of humans who would say, you
Yes.
appear to have a runaway train in production here, and maybe you want to stop it. And great, we could flip the breaker at that point. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if things like bias and discrimination just like were a bug that could be caught in code directly, right? Wouldn't that be incredible if like code would not compile if the AI was not well aligned?
Will, that's the most human thing, right? Bias and discrimination. So probably that's where I think people like you, AI the needs going to go up and up. I have a feeling, especially with models learning from synthetic data. Like, I don't know if people are going to write their own like content, right? If we use AI to put out content and that's what's used to develop more content, like where does the whole, like we are just reinforcing more and more the same signals.
Indeed. That is the feedback loop. That's the one that concerns me. And I think some people are aware that we're already there. There are some projects, long-running projects that have been documenting human written language for, a long, long time that have recently announced we are no longer accepting incoming text as necessarily being human written because you just can't guarantee it anymore, right? And so like our understanding of motivations behind the written word is going to be fundamentally different going forward. And that has a set of concerns for people in the field of literature and analysis. It also has a set of concerns for people in the field of technology and who are trying to treat incoming information as originating from a human in some way, but we're losing that certainty, which do we know that's a good thing? Is it always good? I don't know. It's going to be weird.
Like the other day, Sean, me and Hai, we were trying to use some, AI voice. And Sean tried his, Hai tried his, and I was trying mine. And guess what happened? The software wouldn't even validate my voice to be my own voice. Because I bet it didn't train on any woman, any like Indian woman.
Yeah.
And any Indian woman living in the US, because that just changed me. It's so many layers of who I am, right? Until 20 or so, I was in India. And from then I'm here in the US. Like there's just so many layers of who I am. It's impossible for the AI to like think that's me. So I recorded 30 damn minutes and it just doesn't even verify me. I'm like, what the hell? So I couldn't get my professional AI voice at all. But one interesting thing, it did create, what was that called? It was also an AI clone voice, but it was not the good version of it because it wouldn't verify me. It just created something. And guess how the voice sounded? It sounded like a British Indian. It just made me, I'm like, oh, wow, I speak like, so there are nuances in the way I speak because I'm from India and English there is more British because of the colonization of India. And it just like, it's entirely biased, and it's so evident that the
Incredible.
bias is like right away.
Yeah,
So
that's wild. And I'm sorry that it was like, look at the work you had to do to try and teach it better, right? The
yes,
30 minutes of recording that you had to do. And
it
number
still didn't
goes up
work. It
internally at the
still
company when they're looking at the typical, data set of users randomly sampled. They're like, hey, 99%, it's crushing, right? And like
yes,
1%, like, we don't know, we're having some error. This is the challenge, right? Is that like
yes,
everyone's a part of some 1% some way that's not part of the main group, and none of us is going to be perfectly well
yeah,
modeled or understood, or have the product built for exactly what we need. Yeah, the data doesn't, and the tools that we use often don't ask it to, right? We're not asking ourselves to build things that work for everybody most of the time. That's a big part of the problem.
yeah,
Yeah. Get your shit together, 11 Labs.
Right?
That's right. And that's why we'll never accept your
Oh
sponsorship,
my
no
God.
matter how many times you email me every day. God, you're filling my inboxes.
Hire Will,
trying to
hire
throw us
Will.
money.
No. Let's do hire Will as your AI responsible AI
Yeah.
consultant. You're gonna go there and fix that bias and get my voice
Hey,
professional
this sounds like a
flow in Will.
win-win. I've seen the same thing with like, like the portrait generators, right? Like
Yes.
you'll put up a, and I work with a friend's nonprofit, and we were sort of playing with portrait generators to put up, nice images and portraits of everyone that looked like they came out of a headshot factory somehow. And I tried it out. Worked great. Got all the main features. The curly hair was there. The rosy cheeks were there. I was like, yeah, that looks like me. The majority of other people on this nonprofit are Black, and it was straight up hallucinating. The people that were showing up in the generations afterward, and I was like, you got a training data issue. And
Yeah.
equally as important, and in some ways more worrying, you have an evaluation data set issue. You convinced yourself that you were doing fine. Large portion of users that you were in your eval set, you probably were. And that is not indicative of who is going to use it if you're successful. And I think a lot of people don't pick up on this part of responsible AI, that to do the just number goes up part. We have some data, we want to do better on that data, is going to keep you locked into the same customer segments that you have already got. And so any opportunity for growth into new markets, into new, if it's demographics or if it's something non-demographic, if it's new countries, new languages, new anything, you are going to rule out if you don't carefully think about how our product works for people who are not our current user base. That's, I think, a lot of the ways in which responsible AI can be used to help create this tailwind into growth, right? It's thinking about new markets, thinking about new customer segments, and also identifying those in your existing customer base who are not being served properly.
In fact, this problem is even beyond responsible AI. Even when we do A/B testing, like the typical data science A/B testing, when you run an experiment and you see it tank metrics, you're like, oh, let's not go for it because it's tanking metrics. But have you looked at it's tanking metrics because the people that use it a lot don't probably like it, but maybe it's helping the people that are new and that are not using the product, and maybe you want to have this feature for them. Like, have you looked into that? So when we A/B test, when we come up with this, a feature that we are not sure about the principles of why we want that feature out there, then you end up just serving to the same people that you're already serving, because that's when the metrics go up, right? So always looking at, so the responsibility or the biases and all of that, even in that perspective, is so relevant and so important to look at, like the segments of where it's actually working and where it's not, and maybe in the areas that you think are not important to you, it's working really well, right? Then you'd have to think about the feature in a different way,
Shravya, yes, so much. It's funny how the word bias, I think for me, it has two meanings most of the time. And then when I think hard enough about them, I realize that they're maybe actually the same thing. But like, there's the capital B bias that's like discrimination, right? That's like civil rights, and it's about demographics, and people are biased, and that's a problem. And then there's what you were talking about, which is like a tendency for a measurement to drift away from an unbiased or like the true reality of things. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with demographics. But if it
Yep.
does, then we're back in the first definition. But the
Yes.
same tools are absolutely applicable around other questions of model or automation evaluation, I'll say, right? Like, are we able to see that we are lying to ourselves, that the data is not perfectly capturing the full nuance of the thing that I want? And that can be through inaccurate estimation, that's sort of like statistical bias. It can also be through just customer segments, is what you're talking about, right? I can have
Yep.
bias among customer segments, of course. Like a lot of the same tooling applies there. Absolutely.
I think evaluation, like that's a hot topic right now, right? Especially coming up with LLMs and, so many of these different types. So how do you think about it when you like, what's your take on it?
Yeah, LLM evaluation for bias is a very interesting field right now. And that's sort of where I initially started to feel this. You've got the loud bias, the loan is denied, and you've got like the whispers of bias, like the interest rates are slightly different one.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to see when your generative model is way off base with a particular topic or a particular demographic or a particular segment, because, you ask for that image about that particular thing and what you get is wrong. And so you can feel it, right? It's a visceral reaction like this. It keeps getting this thing wrong. I'm not okay with it. It's harder to evaluate. And maybe let's talk about text instead of image.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was working at Twitter when one of the first models that I would consider leading up to the generative AI sort of revolution that we're in now happened, and it was called Word2Vec. I don't know if you guys were in industry when this is happening. I'm dating myself here. So I think this was like 2013, maybe somewhere 2013, Word2Vec pops online, and suddenly we're able to give it all of, a Twitter's corpus or we didn't have that much compute power, but give it a lot of data and ask what are the things that come out of it. And there were a lot of famous examples coming out right away around if you could ask it for an analogy in the embedding space, right? You could say like, okay, man is to woman as doctor is to, question mark. And what you'd get back would be nurse. And you'd say, okay, so that's factually not true. Right. There's a lot of men who are nurses, a lot of women who are doctors. And also it is indicative of a lot of the text that's out there, right? That the model was trained on, the embedding space learned from. And so It was good, right? The number went up. It was accurate, but it's not what we want in many or most or all situations.
Yeah.
So how do we detect, right? How do we detect those things when it's a big glaring one like man, woman, doctor, nurse? It doesn't take long. It takes like a Twitter intern and 5 minutes of like searching stuff. And it was like, boom, found it, got it. Okay. Now, if it's a subtle thing, if it's a subtle difference in how the model reacts when you change the pronouns of the people that you're talking about, or if you change the name to be more racially coded one way or the other, or you change the type of accessories you describe someone as wearing, or the actions they've taken to be encoding something about their socioeconomic status. And the bias is small. The bias is not obvious. It's not this visceral thing you feel when you're talking with it all the time. That's really hard to detect. And it requires a massive amount of data, right, to be able to notice statistically significant or practically significant effects. So how could we get such a data set, right? How could we get such a corpus that just varies these different encoders of either demographics or other things you care about slightly over massive amounts of text in this case? And the answer that most people come up with right away is, well, let's use an LLM, right? Let's ask for it to generate all these things. And so like immediately, this is when we like pull the handbrake or pull the ripcord again. It was like, wait a minute. Let's think through that solution. It's alluring for a good reason. It's a way of creating a lot of data and asking for control over it. But now what you're talking about is using one LM to create data in order to help judge another LLM. What happens? What happens when what comes out is a report that like something was not exactly equal that we think should have been? Who do we point the finger at? I'm using the thing already because I've kind of already given up on the ability of a human to detect these differences that are small enough. This is all to say, the space of evaluating LLMs for the long tail of challenges that are not huge and like explosively obvious is fraught. It's technically demanding work. It's hard to figure out the right way to do it. Right now, there's sort of a shotgun approach. People are doing some of what I just described, using an LLM as a judge,
Yeah.
using an LLM to generate a data set and having a human be a judge, having humans getting in there and red teaming it, all these kinds of things, doing model interpretability in order to reason about sort of the algorithmic causes of the output and to see, do we like that? Is it indicative of a failure mode? Is there some incorrect reasoning that I can detect through the explanations of what's going on? So it's a tricky space. And as we've been talking about for all 49 minutes, a really important one, which means we're ready for some research, ready for some like fresh ideas, I think, to come in. And the tools that we're dealing with are maybe passable for now, but I do think we need more than what we have at the moment.
So given it's like, I mean, given it is, yeah, a taxing kind of work and it's a tricky space. And we kind of talked earlier about like some companies and people within companies think it's kind of just like extra work because the numbers are going up. How, if there's someone at a company who's like, I really do care about responsible AI and I want to get someone like Will to help me, or I want to build up my own internal team, how do you recommend they kind of like get buy-in across their stakeholders and colleagues?
Yeah. So earlier, I think there was a portion of a question that I didn't get to that was about like company culture. That is such an important like latent variable in all of what we've been talking about, right? So a company where you've got executives or even just one, right? Even just one person who's willing to stand up at that meeting with the other executives and say, I care about this and I'm going to sponsor it. And I want to make sure that it happens. I have found it to be critical. I have tried to work at companies that didn't have that person or where I was not able to connect with that person and found it to be so draining and that the effort that was put in was just disproportionate compared to the meager progress that we were making.
Yeah.
So I would say the first thing to do is to find your person, find your people. If you work at a big company, you're not the only one. So connect with them. And it's okay if it's a bunch of ICs in the beginning, if it's a bunch of people who just want to do the work, that's also necessary. At some point, we also need to find someone who's far enough up the management chain who's willing to provide a little bit of a cover and say, okay, this is not unique to responsible AI. This is also true of any large change to how a company works or any product change or anything. Is there needs to be some space cleared out for folks to like get their hands in there and say, we're going to try something different here. Finding someone who cares and who will champion that work can make the difference between constantly rowing uphill and like actually making significant progress on it. In terms of learning what to do, right? Like maybe we have the idea, but we're not sure what are the tools, what's available to me. Where should I even start? There are some really nice, I can share some links you can include in the video description if you want. Some really nice sort of like tutorials and introductions to the ideas. And a lot of them exist on that spectrum from accessible to any reader to sort of fairly hands-on technical tooling. But getting started with the readable stuff, having your arguments ready to like talk to your teammates about or your manager, your director about, those are great places to start. And they'll also start pointing you towards some of the tools for detection, model remediation, techniques for changing bias or mitigating the bias. My favorite place to sort of stay abreast of the topic and to kind of keep tabs on these advancements as they happen is the proceedings of the FACT conference, FACCT, Fairness, Accountability, Transparency. So that is just the best place to see every year all the new research coming out of all of the big AI ethics and responsible AI teams. And it's very encouraging to look through those. If you ever find yourself as that lone person at a company and you're like, man, like I care about this, but like number not go up so much anymore when I do this stuff, like what's going on? It's for me that the proceedings there have reminded me, in those dark times that like, although there are pockets where it's hard to do this work, there are also places where people are not just struggling, they're actually succeeding and they're actually flourishing and there are groups performing great research in the area. So that's both a great technical source as well as like an emotionally consoling one when you need it, which in this work sometimes you do.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, whether it's just good to have like a model to be like, even if you're not going to apply that model exactly of saying like, here's our other companies or groups of people are doing, and you can kind of see like actually what they're doing beyond
Yeah.
like just like
Yeah.
conceptually trying to think of it just for your own company.
I totally missed the most important answer, which is call me. When you find yourself in a spot where you're like, what do I do? Well, you reach out to me.
Exactly.
You Google me, find my LinkedIn and message me, or find my consultancy and send me a message, and I'm happy to help. I'm also happy to just like email and encourage you and say, fight the good fight, but also happy to help tailor specific solutions to your company's needs.
So, Will, we are close to the ending, but I want to ask you this question. Maybe it's a spicy question, maybe it's not. But do you think there should be some policies that needs to be established by maybe any regarding responsible AI, regarding ethics, some guardrails, especially when we are moving so darn fast? This is like faster than ever I've seen, like especially in my time with technology, right? So, what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a good and important question about what do guardrails look like when things are advancing so quickly. I've seen a few different attempts at answering that question. Some of them looked for a little bit like laws, right? Like policy at the level of government. And
Government, yes.
given the current government, I'm not hopeful that that's going to happen. And I think that some people who are in the responsible AI work were maybe not totally sure that that was even the right place for all of this to live. I think it does have its place. But I think that a lot of the responsibility ultimately falls on the heads of the people who are
Beneath.
developing the products, right?
Mhm.
If you are building something, and that has a feedback loop with the laws, right? So the threat of some type of, government action if you do not care for the safety of your users is unfortunately in some cases what forces companies to do the thing that cares for the safety or the welfare of its users. So in that sense, we will still have, hopefully, something coming from government that helps out there. But these companies are moving fast. They're building new things. They're doing that because it's lucrative. Or they hope it will be lucrative to do that. There's a promise of some kind of capital growth. But my hope for them is that they're also aware of the ways in which they are not just calling opportunity, but also risk, right? That's sort of the other side of the coin that helps people remember to, when they are moving fast, not just make that one number go up, but also ask themselves, what are the ways in which that number going up could actually hurt us, could hurt our users, could hurt everybody. So policy development internally at a company is critical. And when I consult with companies, that's a big part of what we do also. It's not just give me the model, let me try and understand it, and let's figure out a better model or a change to your data collecting process or guardrails for building in the future. Let's actually talk about what your policies are that are allowing you to move quickly and responsibly and safely, and one that has the long-term welfare and the short-term welfare of both your company and your users in mind. So building out internal policies, ideally, is a part of those fast-moving sprints that are moving us forward, not merely a reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad there's people like you thinking about this stuff, because even though things are moving fast right now, I mean, we're all working in tech, and we have this podcast where we talk about AI stuff. So for us, it's like, oh yeah, it's everywhere. Like I'm using AI like 10 to 12 hours a day, like nonstop. It's like crazy in my workflow. But that's not the case for most people, honestly. Like most people, probably AI looks like I ask ChatGPT to do stuff sometimes, maybe a few times a day or a week. It's probably like a very small percentage of their workflow, like a percentage point maybe.
Right.
But at some point, like we're gonna hit a threshold where it is gonna be like, it is kind of like in a lot of stuff right now. And I feel like when we hit that kind of point, there will be like the extreme ripcord, I think, from like society in general, as we're like, hey, we should like think about like this stuff. And luckily we'll have people who have been thinking about this for a while. But
So with agentic, that's what might happen, right, Sean? Imagine like
yeah, that's what
the
I'm thinking.
regular apps that you probably use, like maybe people use WhatsApp, Instagram, or people use YouTube, or like, I don't know, Google search already has AI as part of it. So all of them are going to get into like, if everyone's going to have these agentic workflows, like you call a customer care, you know what's happening. Even today's world, we do end up there, but it's going to get like 100x more, right? All of this. So even if you don't want to interact or you don't have enough questions to interact with ChatGPT like you and I do, the existing workflows of yours are going to incorporate them, which will eventually make you interact with it too without your choice almost.
Yeah, I think when we hit that point, there's going to be a lot more people looking for people like you. Well, I mean, like there's already a lot of people looking for that kind of thing now, but I feel like at that point it's going to be really important to have people who aren't just like starting thinking about it then, but who've been thinking about it for a long time.
It'll be, I mean, I'm glad that this field has existed for a long time. And under a different name, it existed long before I got into tech at all. And people have been thinking about society and technology and how those things work together and how they sometimes can be detrimental to each other. And the field will continue, right? It doesn't matter who's getting fired from which agency. There are like there is a movement, I believe, around doing work that is responsible, that is safe for people. I think that speaks to what's in enough people's hearts that like we will continue to fight the good fight, whether or not there are laws that say that we must. Enough of us will. Rather, many of us will. Now, whether that many is enough, I think, is the big question that we'll see, for better or worse, in the upcoming years.
We usually close our show with asking a question about like what's a skill a data scientist should learn or something. But actually, I want to switch it up this time. In your opinion, if every AI org had to adopt one just new like norm or habit, what do you think it should be?
I wished every place that measured their success asked themselves early and often the ways in which the choices they made in measurement are incorrect. So we started the beginning by talking about things are being good, right? And how that's really an output of the measurement that you've chosen. And so I think being able to think critically about the compromises we have made in our journey to get to a measurement that we can use, right? I chose to use the data source that had a high coverage, that was cheap, that was easy to collect. I chose the function that was quick to evaluate and that didn't require human intervention or massive compute power. All those things that came into the measurements that we make for our success. I wish we spent a long time asking ourselves, are we okay with that? Are we okay with that? And can we enumerate the ways in which, or some of the ways in which it will lie to us? And I think that's true of measurement writ large, but I have a special need/bone to pick with that being a part of the machine learning development process. Because I think so often machine learning leans on the crutch of, I have data, I have a function definition that got put into code that compiled, number goes up. And I want us to spend more time in that process and after that process, asking ourselves, not did we get it right, but what are the ways in which we got it wrong? And how aware are we of them? Do we need to invest in understanding them more?
Yeah, that's such a good answer. I mean, it's like creating metrics that matter is already hard enough when you're like, hey, is this metric that I'm looking at the product level like meaningful for user, meaningful for the actual business? And you're already thinking about all this other stuff because teams operate around this metric. Like their OKRs are made on this metric.
Oh my
People's
God.
promotions.
Yeah, people are hired and fired over the movement
metrics.
of this metric.
Yeah. And very few times have I, or maybe probably never have I thought like, well, how can this like, I mean, sometimes I guess like I think about like, how can people game it? But I don't think about like, how can the machine lie to me about this? So that's a great answer. And I think something we'll have to be more and more thoughtful about with as we're evaluating any sort of tool that's leveraging AI.
I hope you do. I hope it serves you well. And if it's not clear how to do that.
I mean, I'm not going to do it. The agent's going to do it.
Okay.
This is going to be the thumbnail.
Yeah.
We'll say this.
Call me.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome, man. Well, this is a great episode. Before we go, Will, anything else you want to share with our listeners, where they can reach you at, where they can follow along with your work?
Yeah. So my consulting company is called Accountable Algorithm, and you can find me at the website accountablealgorithm.com or just LinkedIn or, call me. Or whatever works, but I'd be happy to hear from anyone who is thinking about this stuff or wonders if they should be thinking about this kind of stuff.
Great. Accountable algorithm. We'll drop it in the show notes below. And yeah, thanks for joining us, Will. Thanks everyone for listening. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe. It helps the algorithm. It keeps the algorithm accountable to keep sending people to the Datanator podcast.
Nice
And
callback.
of course, drop any.
And guys, please be responsible.
And please be
And
responsible.
comment.
And drop a
The
comment.
good comments. Drop a comment.
Yeah.
If you don't, I'll be there and it'll get messy.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.